Can you imagine the amazing foods German sailors ate on U-boats during World War I? Packed into steel submarines for months, every meal had to last. Yet some were far better than you'd expect. Wait until you see what they managed to serve hundreds of feet below the surface. What ingenious meals kept sailors alive beneath the waves in World War I? You might think food on German U-boats was little more than tinned sludge and stale biscuits, but this loaf proved otherwise. It was called Kriegsbrot, or war bread, and it was made right on board using rye flour, barley meal, and potato starch. Baked so dense it could double as a ballast weight, still, it stayed fresh for weeks in the damp metallic air of the sub. The cook would slice it with a bayonet because ordinary knives bent under its crust. Yet inside, it was warm, chewy, and smelled faintly of malt. When butter ran out, the men spread it with rendered fat from preserved pork tins. Sometimes, they even toasted slices on hot engine plates when the diesel fumes were low. Every crewman swore by it as the one true comfort at sea. It was cheap, easy to store, and did not crumble under pressure, literally. The last slices were often shared during the return voyage, a small, quiet celebration that meant they had survived another mission alive. Down there, one loaf could taste like victory itself. Now, Liberty stew sounds like something you would expect on an American table, but the Germans had their own version called Erbsensuppe, the humble pea stew that fueled the Imperial Navy for years. Dried yellow peas, salt pork, onions, and carrots formed the base. And when supplies thinned, the cook thickened it with breadcrumbs or potato peelings. What you got was a hearty, thick green paste that clung to every spoon. It looked miserable, but it filled stomachs fast and kept the men's morale higher than the rising carbon dioxide levels inside the hull. Imagine the smell of simmering bacon cutting through diesel fumes. That was as close to heaven as a submariner could get. It was served from a single pot, ladled into dented metal bowls with the same precision as loading a torpedo. Everyone ate shoulder to shoulder in total silence, except for the occasional clang of a spoon against steel. The stew might not have looked like much, but it kept entire crews going for weeks. Even officers admitted that without it, most missions would have ended long before the torpedoes ever left the tubes. This next one might sound like a cruel joke. Mock goose. The German Navy version was not bird at all, but potatoes, onions, and stale bread layered to taste like roasted goose skin. When seasoned right, it actually came close to the real thing, and sailors would joke that it was the captain's pet cooked for dinner. The submarine cook used leftover fat from preserved tins mixed with vinegar and bay leaves to give it that rich roast aroma. After baking it in the iron mess oven, the top browned perfectly, like crisp skin. It became a ship favourite on holidays, and the men would line up early with their tin plates just to smell it. If you closed your eyes and ignored the engine noise, you could almost imagine a Christmas back home. Some cooks even sprinkled crushed pretzels on top to imitate the crunch of roasted meat. It was cheap, easy to prepare, and a rare reminder of landlocked family dinners. When you're trapped underwater for weeks, even the idea of a goose, however false, could lift the entire crew's spirit. You would not expect peanuts on a submarine, but the Germans had their own protein trick using ground nuts imported before the naval blockade. This dish was a lifesaver, literally. Peanut loaf was made from mashed legumes mixed with flour, egg powder, and just enough salt to fool the tongue into thinking it was real meat. It baked into a firm loaf, sliced thin and fried in fat. It gave off a nutty aroma that somehow cut through the stench of fuel oil. The men loved it because it was heavy, filling, and rich in calories. The cook claimed it could last a whole voyage without spoiling. That was a miracle below sea level. It was also quiet to eat, a surprisingly valuable trait when sound discipline meant survival. There were stories of crews celebrating safe returns with peanut loaf and ersatz coffee, pretending it was Sunday lunch at home. It might sound simple to us, but down there, each slice was a small piece of comfort disguised as dinner. You might think dessert was out of the question on a German U-boat, but you would be wrong. The cook always saved something sweet for morale. One of those treats was Kriegskuchen, or war cake, baked without milk, eggs, or butter, but still rich in flavor, made with syrup, dried fruit, and whatever sweetener the cook could trade from surface ships before leaving port. The batter was mixed by hand and baked inside small metal tins wedged near the engine heat. The vibration kept the batter fluffy in a strange way, and by the time the dive ended, you had warm, sticky cake ready for slicing. Every man got one small piece after long missions. It was chewy, spicy, and tasted faintly of cinnamon. If the boat had managed a successful attack, they celebrated with double portions of war cake and ersatz coffee. It might sound small, but in the gloom of a steel coffin deep below the Atlantic, that bite of sweetness could remind you there was still a world above worth fighting for. Corn was not native to German diets, but U-boats carried sacks of cornmeal because it stored well and filled bellies fast. Cornmeal mush was cooked in boiling water and stirred until it thickened into a porridge, then served with beet syrup or condensed milk when available. It was cheap, easy to make, and could be eaten at any hour of the day. The sailors would scoop it with their tin cups and eat standing up between watch shifts. Sometimes the cook fried the leftovers into cakes the next morning and sprinkled them with sugar, if he could spare it. The men called it submarine pudding, a little joke that everyone appreciated because humor was as rare as sunlight inside the hull. Many later said that the smell of syrup and fried corn reminded them of bakeries back home, and that was priceless. This was not fine dining, but it kept the crew steady and satisfied through endless grey days beneath the surface. You might be surprised to hear that a version of brown bread found its way into the German Navy pantry. It was packed in round tins, sealed tight against seawater. A blend of rye, barley, and molasses made it dense and slightly sweet. The cook steamed the tins inside boiling water pots, so the bread came out moist even after weeks of storage. The crew sliced it thin and spread it with canned lard or mustard, sometimes with tinned cheese if supplies allowed. It was one of the few foods that smelled almost pleasant down there, like a bakery trapped inside. An iron hull. This bread was treasured because it resisted mold and tasted the same on day 60 as it did on day 1. Sailors would barter with one another for extra slices, trading cigarettes or favors to get them. It was the submarine version of currency, simple, reliable, and always welcome at any table above or below the waves. Desserts were rare aboard, but once in a while luck struck and apples made it aboard in tins or dried slices. Apple pandowdy became the unofficial celebration pie of the German U-boat fleet, made by layering stewed apples with crumbs of stale bread soaked in sweet syrup, then baked in a small iron pan near the diesel engine's exhaust heat. The result was rustic, golden, and smelled like home. The name came from an Old English recipe adapted by naval cooks who picked it up during raids on captured merchant ships. The sailors loved it, not just for the taste, but for the memory it carried of family kitchens and quiet Sundays. They would eat it slowly, savoring each bite as though it might be their last. Every slice told the story of how resourceful people can be. Even under the sea, with shells raining above, they still found a way to make something warm and good. Cookies on a submarine sound impossible, but these were not ordinary cookies. They were compressed rations shaped to look like them, made of oats, honey, and crushed nuts, bound together with syrup. They were baked before departure and stored in metal boxes so tight even seawater could not touch them. They were sweet, dense, and heavy enough to break a tooth if you were not careful. Still, they tasted like heaven after long shifts in stale air when energy was low. The officers passed them out sparingly, calling them reward biscuits. Sailors dunked them into ersatz coffee or spread condensed milk on top when rations allowed. Some said they were the only dessert that could survive the crushing pressure of the Atlantic and still taste the same. When the men surfaced, they saved the last one for the trip home. That final bite symbolized the journey's end, the strength it took to get there. And finally, we have donuts, a food that somehow followed every army in every war. The Germans called theirs Kriegskrapfen, Kriegskrapfen. Simple fried dough balls rolled in sugar and filled with jam. When the cook made them, it meant the patrol was over or a victory had been scored. They fried them in reused fat saved from pork tins. The smell filled the boat, drifting through every narrow corridor. It was the one time men forgot they were trapped inside a metal tube below the sea. Laughter echoed between compartments, and for a brief moment, the U-boat felt almost like home. These donuts were soft, sweet, and dangerously addictive. The jam was usually made from beets or apples, anything the cook could find before departure. By the time they surfaced, most of the sugar was gone, but the memory lingered. No one aboard ever forgot the taste of those rare moments when the war outside seemed to stop for just a bite of something warm. Victory Garden vegetables sounded like a land story, but German submariners carried their own little gardens in tins. Before departure, the cook loaded onions, cabbages, beets, and sturdy carrots from coastal markets, choosing vegetables that kept their dignity in damp air and rolling seas. Parsley and dill were wrapped in wet cloth and tucked beneath benches, a faint breath of soil inside a steel hull. On longer patrols, the men sprouted mustard and cress in shallow pans, rinsed with carefully saved wash water, a green whisper that cut through diesel and oil. Those leaves were not decoration. They sharpened pea soup, brightened salted pork, and turned grey plates hopeful. A handful of chopped cabbage stretched stews for another watch. A few sprigs of dill made tinned fish taste like it came from a kitchen instead of a crate. When storms punished the boat and nerves thinned, the sight of something living steadied hands. Sailors swore the greens kept scurvy at the door and homesickness one step behind it. In a world of iron, gauges and orders, the crunch of a raw carrot felt like resistance. It proved that patience could be eaten, that thrift could be tender, and that even under the sea, a garden still knew how to feed a crew. Corn fritters were not exactly a German tradition, yet sacks of cornmeal rode every patrol because they behaved well at sea. The cook whisked cornmeal with water, a spoon of fat, and a stingy pinch of salt, then folded in minced onion or slivers of preserved bacon when luck allowed. He dropped spoonfuls into a pan that rattled with each swell, the batter snapping like small fireworks as the fritters puffed and browned. The smell chased men from their bunks faster than any order. Hot rounds hit dented plates beside pea stew or salted herring, and for a minute the boat felt like a fairground, not a weapon. Corn fritters pleased officers because they were quiet to eat and quick to serve. They pleased sailors because they tasted indulgent without asking the pantry for more than it could give. Leftovers turned crisp again on an engine plate for the night watch, a pocket snack with a heroic job. When the sea grew mean and the dive lasted too long, a single fritter lifted spirits like a letter from home. Simple food. It is golden, it is friendly, and in the tightest spaces, it reminds everyone that warmth is something you make, not something you wait for. Mock duck travelled to sea without feathers, bones, or even meat. It was a bread and onion roll baked to behave like a roast. The cook spread stale slices with mustard, scattered sweet browned onions across the top, and rolled the loaf tight as a map, tying it with string filched from cargo. He brushed the outside with pork fat saved from tins and slid it into the mess oven until the crust shone and the edges crisped. When he carved it, steam drifted into the corridor and everything smelled like Sunday. Sailors closed their eyes and tasted memory. The trick was not deception for its own sake. It was conservation shaped into ceremony. Meat belonged to holidays and triumphs. Mock duck filled the days between with something proud enough to serve the whole crew. A splash of vinegar kept the balance honest. A few dill fronds pretended to be a garden. Plenty of meals at sea This one also had a story to tell. It said thrift could be generous, that bread could play the hero, and that if the world denied a feast, a clever kitchen would write one anyway and let every plate believe. Sweet potato croquettes showed up when the storeman smiled and the market had been kind. Crates of sweet potatoes kept well in cool compartments, their skins holding tight through storms and hard dives. The cook mashed them with a little flour and a shiver of nutmeg, then shaped the mixture into neat ovals that looked like something from a hotel tray, not a warboat. He rolled each in crumbs ground from stale bread and coaxed them to gold in a shallow pan. The first bite was soft, gently sweet, the crust a quick applause. On feast days, a spoon of sharp apple compote rode alongside. On ordinary days, a thread of salted pork fat painted the top and made them gleam. Men who had worked the pumps all night ate in quiet relief. Croquettes did more than fill bellies. They made time feel civilized. The crew sat straighter, spoke softer, and traded jokes like coins. No one pretended these were grand. They were tidy, careful, and kind. In a world that asked sailors to vanish underwater for weeks, kindness mattered. It tasted like warm spice and crisp crumb, and it taught the boat that celebration could be built from patience, a pan, and a steady hand. Baked bean casserole earned its bunk because beans keep promises. They are cheap, they travel well, and they carry spices like old friends. The German galley version began with soaked beans, a heel of smoked pork, onions, mustard, and a dark spoon of syrup or molasses if the quartermaster could spare it. The cook layered beans with crumbs of brown bread in a battered pan and let the mess oven work slowly while the boat rode the swell. Hours later, the casserole emerged glossy and thick, the beans soft as confession, the sauce clinging to every curve. Bowls banged along the table. Conversation dimmed to a satisfied hum. Even the watchman chewed slower. On days when meat was scarce, the pork disappeared and cabbage jumped in. No one complained. Bean casseroles did not care about pride. They cared about stamina, about keeping a crew steady through long watches and longer silences. The pan scraped clean every time. The cook counted that sound as a victory. In tight quarters where hunger turns sailors short of temper, this dish brought patience back to the table. It was the boat's heartbeat, simple and steady, and it proved again that the best food walks beside you, not ahead. Molasses pudding was the submarine's quiet holiday, a spoon of sweetness earned after hard weather or good news. Sugar lived under lock and key, but a tin of molasses or beet syrup could sweeten an entire crew. The pudding batter was spare and stubborn, made from flour, syrup, a pinch of spice, and a little fat scraped from a tin. The cook tucked the bowl near the warm engine bulkhead and let vibration do the whisking that muscles could not. When the pudding set, it jiggled like a promise. He poured more syrup across the top and watched it disappear into the sponge. Men leaned over their bowls, eyes soft in the low light. The taste was deep and old, like bakery windows on winter streets. It stuck to ribs in the best way and made the next watch feel shorter. No one called it luxury. They called it fare. The sea took and took. This gave back. If there was extra, the cook saved it for the night crew because the dark has its own hunger. A spoonful there could turn a cold corridor into a kitchen and a silent man into someone willing to talk again. Rice and raisin. Porridge did not ask for much and gave back more than it had to. Rice packed tight and travelled without trouble. Raisins brought sunlight from another season into the bowl. The cook simmered rice in watered milk or even water alone, stirred in raisins near the end, and finished with a spoon of syrup and a pinch of cinnamon if fortune smiled. Sailors ate it at dawn when the sea was grey and the hull breathed loudly. It slid down easy, warmed hands, and remembered childhood without saying so. On lean days, the cook cracked an egg into the pot and whisked fast, giving the porridge strength without stealing from the meat locker. On heavy days, he kept it gentle and let sweetness carry the load. Rice and raisins do a simple thing well. They do not shout, they steady. Crews who knew the ache of long silence understood the gift. A good breakfast sets the compass of the day. This one pointed toward patience and held it there. When bowls emptied, men wiped them with bread and went back to work softer around the eyes, like the morning had done them a small and solid kindness. Deviled ham sandwich spread was a submarine trick that tasted louder than it looked. Preserved ham came in tins, reliable as a pressure gauge. The cook mashed it with sharp mustard, minced onions, a little vinegar, and black pepper until the mixture bit back. He spread it thick across dark bread or piled it into hollowed rolls and passed the plates down the narrow table. The scent cut through diesel and damp wool in a clean line. It woke tired men faster than the bell. On rare days, chopped pickles joined the party and the whole boat grinned like children. This spread mattered because it turned a ration into a moment. You could eat it standing, you could eat it fast, and you could feel like a person while you did it. In a craft where space belonged to maps, engines, and torpedoes, flavour had to find small corners to live in. Deviled ham did that job without asking attention for itself. It burned a little. It bragged a little. Mostly, it reminded the crew that appetite can be braced, sharpened, and given back its courage with a jar, a knife, and 5 quiet minutes. Victory biscuits were the crunch that morale needed. Flour ran short. So the cook mixed rye, oat, and barley, nudged the dough with lard, and rolled it thin enough to snap. He baked sheets of biscuits until they browned and sang when tapped. No fancy shapes, no sugar crowns, just honest crispness that kept its dignity in damp air. The tin lived near the galley, and everyone knew the sound of its lid. A biscuit dunked in ersatz coffee softened into a believable cookie. Crumbled, it thickened stews. Crushed, it breaded fish pulled from a lucky net. Sailors tucked 2 or 3 into pockets before watch, a small insurance policy against the slow hunger that nibbles at patience. Officers liked them because they replaced crackers the blockade kept away. Sailors liked them because they were shareable, tradable, and sturdy enough to survive a squeeze through any hatch. When the last tin ran low, the cook rationed them like compliments and saved a handful for landfall. Nothing dramatic, just the right food at the right time. In a boat that asked men to trust steel and silence, That kind of certainty was its own comfort. Canned salmon loaf might not sound glamorous, but in the belly of a U-boat, it was a masterpiece of planning and luck. Salmon tins arrived from Norway before the blockade tightened, their bright metal promising protein when meat was long gone. The cook mashed the pink flakes with crumbs of rye bread, powdered egg, and chopped onion, then packed it into a pan lined with greaseproof paper. The loaf steamed beside the engine room bulkhead until it firmed into something sliceable. When served warm with mustard or cold with vinegar, it tasted like victory on a quiet day. Sailors claimed it smelled of sunlight, a thing they had nearly forgotten. Leftovers turned into sandwiches the next watch, the oil soaking the bread until it shimmered. It was quick, nourishing, and impossible to ruin. On long voyages, it became a marker of good luck. If the salmon loaf held its shape, so would the mission. When the men surfaced, they swore nothing on land ever tasted as fine. Down there, flavor did not have to be perfect. It just had to remind you that somewhere above the waves, the sea still gave back as much as it took. Raisin pie was a strange gift to find on a war boat, yet the crew swore it saved their sanity. The cook made it from dried fruit soaked in black tea and sweetened with molasses, layered between thin sheets of dough pressed by hand. The smell drifted through the boat like gossip, softening tempers faster than any speech. When the pie cooled, the filling gleamed dark and sticky, a sweet rebellion against monotony. Each slice carried sugar, memory, and an honest attempt at celebration. The raisins kept for months. The crust used almost no fat, and the recipe forgave every mistake. Officers cut small wedges for the watch crew. Sailors pretended not to see when extra crumbs went missing. They called it funeral pie, half joking, half true. Life underwater was always balanced on the edge of loss, and sweetness needed a place to stand. When the surface call finally came and daylight broke through the hatch, the last piece was shared in silence. It was not dessert anymore. It was proof they had made it back to air. Corn chowder joined the submarine menu when the supply ship started carrying tins of creamed corn from occupied ports. It was humble and kind, thick enough to hold a spoon upright even in rough seas. The cook began with onions and a cube of salted pork, then added potatoes, corn, and a splash of milk powder whisked with water. The chowder bubbled quietly while the engines drummed beneath the floor. Each ladleful was pale gold, the surface dotted with fat that glistened like sunlight. Men cradled their bowls, breathing in warmth instead of air thick with oil and metal. For a moment they could imagine a kitchen, a wife, a window. The chowder stretched thin but never disappointed. When supplies ran low, the cook replaced pork with dried herring. Nobody complained. Corn chowder did not chase glory. It reminded the crew that food could still be gentle. When depth charges boomed above, men tightened their grips on the bowls instead of their nerves. Some memories arrive by sound, others by scent. For these sailors, it was the smell of corn, salt, and steam, forever tied to the fragile quiet between alarms. Vegetable hash was the closest thing the U-boat had to comfort food. It was made from anything left: onions, potatoes, cabbage stems, even pickled carrots. The cook chopped everything fine, threw it into a pan slick with bacon grease, and stirred until it turned golden and fragrant. Some days, he cracked in a powdered egg to bind it. Others, he splashed vinegar to wake the flavor. It smelled like hope, tasted like necessity, and looked like chaos. The men loved it anyway. Hash was democratic. Everyone got the same scoop, from captain to newest hand. Filled bellies fast and never wasted a crumb. The clatter of spoons against metal bowls was its own kind of music, louder than the hum of machines. Sailors joked that vegetable hash held the entire war in one pan, rough, unpredictable, but somehow still working. When the patrol ended, nobody remembered the exact ingredients, only how it made them feel human again. Simple food has its own power. It binds people better than orders. Even at depth, a pan of hash reminded them that they were still part of the same table. Mock apple pie sounded absurd to anyone who had never eaten one, yet aboard a submarine it was proof that imagination fared better than flour. Apples spoiled too quickly, so the cook used hardtack crackers soaked in syrup and lemon rind to build the filling. The mixture softened, thickened, and smelled so convincing that first-timers refused to believe it was fake. The crust was whatever pastry could be managed, rolled thin with a bottle, and baked near the engine heat until brown. When sliced, the pie oozed like the real thing, sweet and tart. Even officers smiled, though they called it ersatz nonsense. It was nonsense worth making. Each bite reminded the crew that creativity could cheat scarcity, that taste depended as much on memory as on ingredients. Mock apple pie taught sailors to trust their cook like they trusted the captain. Both kept them alive in different ways. After all, when the world above was rationed and grey, a golden slice below the waves was more than dessert. It was defiance served warm, and everyone took seconds when they could. If you enjoyed diving through these forgotten meals as much as the crew enjoyed eating them, drop your favourite dish in the comments, give that like button a good stir, and subscribe so you never miss another taste of history